This Week in Economics on the 5th of May, 2018 from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network. Very interesting day. The annual meeting of the Berkshire Hathaway meeting was held in Omaha, Nebraska. That is Warren Buffett's shop. And when we finish our part here, we'll hear a little bit from Warren Buffett, an interview done for Yahoo Financial Network. That was live stream, incidentally, today on Yahoo.com, and we recorded some of it where Mr. Buffett was answering an array of questions, about 45 minutes. We'll turn that into a separate program, which will be across the Bostonred Network, Numbers Man, and Bostonred. Probably tomorrow that will show up, and we'll explore what the thinking of Mr. Buffett there and various things like tariffs. He talked about even things like machine learning. Very interesting. That was Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger is, I believe, 93. Warren Buffett is 87. So these men have been around a long time, but one of the keys is, and Charlie Munger talked about this, is lifelong learning. If someone tells you, well, I have the magic parachute, and that is about it, but these fellows in the old tradition, and it went on to my generation, which is 20 years younger than, Warren Buffett, I should say. Charlie Munger, we have to keep counting fingers and toes. But anyway, nonetheless, of reading, and something I developed as a child. I was just thinking about that. I was 7 years old, and I read the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. And that started me off into the field of economics, and later reading Capital. But you learn basic economics, not only Marxian economics, but you learn Classian economics there. That was before Keynes. But you did have Ricardo and some of the others were around, Adam Smith, etc. Anyway, nonetheless, you get a basic background there, and for younger people, I tell them that you start to get the mathematical background, which is important. It is not as paramount today, because we look much more today to the market, and of course, again, we have models and formulas, etc. out there. Do they explain what's going on? Well, today's economics is more real-time and less historical, other than, for instance, you have now these massive tax cuts that have not been seen since Ronald Reagan. So you have sort of the same situation, but you can't compare the two economies, because the economy under Reagan was a much smaller economy. It was not globalized. George H.W. Bush, the first President Bush, uttered the words, what he called the New World Order. And, of course, at his time, that was just starting in the late, actually in the late 80s, in 1988, with President Bush. But that went into the early 90s, and then, of course, Bill Clinton came along. And that is the last time that we have seen 4% unemployment. And we'll talk about that in this broadcast. What does 4% unemployment, or actually 3.9, mean? There are many states, and we'll get to that in the show also, how these states are. Because you have states out there with 2%, and I think even less than 2% unemployment, what that does to the job market in terms of your labor force participation rate. Obviously, if it's in the 60s now and you're dropping, and if you drop to 3.9, we're starting to see workers that are no longer looking. Part of the problem there is that many of the entry-level jobs are no longer advertised because the availability of workers is not very good, and also the compensation, standard compensation, hourly wage, whatever you want to call it, has went up, so those jobs are not being filled. Thus, that creates a reserve army of unemployed. You can have a reserve army even at 1.5%, 2%, or 3%. And that is where the block sort of hits there. In other words, that's sort of a roadblock. And that is the reason the rate fell. Discouraged workers, you want to call them that. Nonetheless, let's get to this. We have the employment situation, which is our household survey. That was released on the 4th on Friday, so it's as new as it gets. The household situation is first, the total payroll employment, they call it non-farm, we'll skip that much, increased by 164,000 in April. The unemployment edged down to 3.9. That's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And now the household survey, will go through it. The unemployment rate 3.9, following 6 months at 4.1. So 0.2 of a point. It edged down. The number of unemployed persons at 6.3 million, also edged down over time. Among the major workers groups, the unemployment rate for adult women decreased to 3.5 in April. The jobless rate for adult men at 3.7. For teenagers at 12.9. For Europeans at 3.6. For African Americans at 6.6. For Asians at 2.8, and Latinos at 4.8%. Little change there. Amongst the unemployed, the number of jobs lost and persons who completed temporary jobs declined by 188,000 in May to 3 million. The number of long-term unemployed, we look at that number, that's for 27 weeks. Now, if you're out more than 27 weeks, you're not in this circumference. Little changed at 1.3 million in April. Accounts for 20% of those that are unemployed or redundant. The number of long-term unemployed was down by 340,000. Both the labor force participation rate at 62.8 and the employment population ratio at 60.3. Little change in April, basically the same. The number of persons employed part-time for economic reasons as involuntary part-time workers was essentially unchanged at 5 million people there. Those people would have preferred, obviously, full-time work, but it was not available. In April, 1.4 million persons were marginally attached to the labor force, down by 172,000 from a year ago. The data is seasonally adjusted. We'll have some more adjustments to this, no doubt. Amongst the marginally attached, there were 408,000 discouraged workers in. That's quite a few, almost roughly 500,000 in April. Little change from a year ago. So in other words, that pool is still there. Discouraged workers are persons not currently looking for work because they believe there's no work to be found. The establishment survey, we always have the household and establishment. The total non-farm, and they still differentiate this out by 164,000, with an average monthly of about 191,000. That's over 12 months. So you get a little bit, in other words, under 200,000. In April, employment in professional and business services increased by 54,000 over the past 12 months. The industry has added 518,000, so we'll have 1 million jobs. Employment in manufacturing increased by 24,000. Most of the gain was in a durable goods component, with machinery adding 8,000 jobs, and employment in fabricated steel continues to trend up at 4,000. Manufacturing employment has risen by 245,000 jobs over the year, with about 3/4 of the growth in durable goods. That's heavy manufacturing. Healthcare added 24,000 in April. That's 305,000 jobs over the year. And let me just look at that and see, as versus manufacturing, what they added. Yeah, it's greater than manufacturing. Manufacturing added 245,000 over the year. Healthcare, on the other hand, added 305,000. Now, this is a sector that many people said after Obamacare was passed, it would be totally destroyed. It did not happen. Ambulatory health services at 14,000 and medical centers at 8,000. In April, employment in mining increased by 8,000, with most of the gains occurring in support activities for mining. That was 7,000, and since recent low in October, employment in mining has risen by 86,000. You get a kind of idea of where mining is, and that includes mining, fracking, etc. Employment changed little over the month in other major industries, including construction, wholesale trade, retail trade, transportation, warehousing, information, financial activities, leisure, and hospitality, and government. The average hourly working week for all workers was unchanged at 34.5 in April. In manufacturing, the work week increased 0.2 to 41.1. For April, the average hourly earning for all workers on rose by 4 cents to $26.84. Now, this is the average. I always remind people of that. The average earnings for production non-supervisory workers increased 5 cents to $22.51. The change in total payroll employment for February was revised down. That's interesting. It was revised down from 326,000 to 324,000. The change for March was revised up from 103,000 to 135,000, with the revisions. Employment gains in February and March combined were 30,000 more than previously reported. This is not unusual for Q1 with the winter and various other things in. Now let's take a look at this. It's something we use occasionally here. It's called the Employment Cost Index, used by many financial analysts. Compensation costs for civilian workers increased 0.8%, seasonally adjusted for the 3-month period ending in March. Wages, salaries make up 70% of the compensation costs. It increased 0.9%, and benefits, which make up the remainder, increased 30%. Of compensation increased 0.7%. Civilian workers, compensation costs for civilian workers increased 2.7% for the 12-month period, that was 1 year, ending in March to March, compared with compensation costs increase of 2.4% in March of 2017. Wages and salaries increased 2.7% for the 12-month period ending in March of this year, 2018, and increased 2.5% for the 12-month period ending in March of 2017. Benefits costs increased at 2.6% for the 12-month period ending in March of this year, 2018, to March of 2017. So when you factor in your benefits costs and your basic costs, a little bit of a rise, not very much. Compensation costs for private industry workers increased at 2.8% over the year, a larger increase than the 2.3% in March of 2017. It is larger by 0.5%. Salaries increased 2.9% for the current 12-month period and increased 2.6% in March of 2017. The cost of benefits rose 2.5% for the 12 months ending in March of 2018 and increased 1.9% in March of 2017. So about 0.6% there. Employers' costs for health benefits increased 1.5% for the 12-month period that's ending in March. Among the occupation groups, compensation costs increased this is the private sector. The 12-month period ranged from 2.6 for managers, professionals, and related occupations, and natural resources, construction, and maintenance occupations to 3% for production, transportation, materials, moving, and transportation. So, in effect, the maintenance, production, they got 3.3%, but they lag behind. Amongst the industry sectors, let's see, compensation, of course, increased for workers for a 12-month period that is in March of 2018, called the super sector. Anyway, from 2.3, for education and health services to 3.3 for financial activities. So education, the much touted 2% raise in the Commonwealth of West Virginia and various other places. In Arizona, they'll get about the same as phased in. Compensation costs for state and local government workers increased 2.2 for the 12-month period ending in March. In March of 2017, the increase actually got more at 2.6%. Wages and salaries increased 1.8% for the 12-month period ending in March of this year, compared with 2.2% a year ago. Benefits costs increased 3% for the 12-month period ending in March. The prior year increase was 3.1% there, and seasonal factors and updates there. Let's see what else we got here. The 2018 seasonal factors for direct adjustment of services, revisions, etc. And we have some tables here. I won't really go into those. I will just append this simply. This is compensation and 3 months in adjusted December 2017 at 0.6 temps, wages and salaries at 0.5 temps, and benefits at 0.5. This is in civilian workers. And in March, it was 8 temps, 9 temps for wages and salaries, and 7 temps, a little better, roughly 2 temps, wages up a little bit more, 4 temps there. Some of the things here. Anyway, this is widely looked at and not to be called inflationary because it hasn't went very far. This is from Reuters. Job growth rebounds modestly. Rate hits, and DJ Trump was talking about this. The unemployment rate dropped to a 17.5-year low of 3.9%. As jobless Americans just left the workforce. Now, when this happens, it comes to a very peculiar dynamic, and this happens. We've seen this happen in many states that have a lower unemployment rate. You're talking around 2%, 1.9%, where people basically stop working because the rate is so low that employers pretty much stopped hiring. In other words, run out of people to hire, and the people that have left the workforce, depending on how long they had been out of the workforce to start with. So that's a still fewer amount of job creation, fewest amount in 6 months, followed by outside gain of that was an outliner there, the 324,000 in February, kind of leftover pinned up demand. The drop of 0.2 percentage points in the unemployment rate. It was at 4.1. That was there for about 6 months, and we go back to 2000, within striking distance of the Fed's 3.8% by the end of the year. Is there a difference between 3.8, 3.9? It actually, if on this trend, it could go a little lower than 3.8%. A lot of it would depend on what happens the rest of Q2. We in May, and of course June, a lot of that would depend on petrol prices. June and July, and August is usually always a transition month. If there's going to be any, as they say, bang in the economic scenario, it comes in August, the last of July and August. Because August is people traditionally go on holiday, etc. Those are some of the things that happen. From the Reuters people, they had their forecast, they polled their economists, 192 jobs in April, and the unemployment rate falling to 4%. Well, a little bit off on that. Hourly rate, 4 cents. Yeah. Anyway, nothing to write home about there. We talked about the employment cost index, so we don't need to go there. Wages rising at fastest pace in 11 years. The Fed inflation, what is it at? 1.9 year on year. That's close to 2% there. And, could go a little bit higher than that. Central bank left the rates unchanged. And inflation rate, at 2%, systematic rate. Anyway, it expected unemployment to drop, some economists, to 3.5%. One of the ways to look at this, especially historically, when you had unemployment above 4%, you drop to 3.5%. There can also be some dangers there because you start enlarging your reserve army of the unemployed, and that can lead to hiccups in the system. The economy needs to create, and see, this has basically changed since the time of Barack Obama. 120,000 jobs per month to keep up with growth. We used to talk about around 350,000 jobs to pull out some of the slack, and you still have quite a bit of slack out there. Employment gains have averaged 199,750. Well, and that's roughly about 200,000, so about 80,000 there. Manufacturing increased by 24,000 in April after gaining 22,000 in March. It's been up. Some of that has come back online. We're waiting to see. I was listening to Nightly Business Report. It's on PBS, and it's now CNBC sponsors, but produces it. But nonetheless, what starts to happen here, the whole dynamic is changing of how we do business in the so-called service economy. Now you're going back to a little bit of manufacturing, but a lot of the manufacturing is done by these smaller job type of shops, particularly for steel rolls, roll steel, etc. They buy it from some producer, and they make everything from beer cans, you name it, microwave casings, that kind of thing. Situation there. The retail sector is really battered. 1,800 jobs added that. Payrolls for temporary help seemed at a herbanger of, let's see, future permanent, seen as, I'm sorry about that, rose by 10,000 after falling 2,100 in March. Leisure hospitality workers added 1,800 jobs. That's not unusual as you get to the summer months. Government payroll down 4,000 there. This is decline in education employment at state level. A lot of teachers are leaving, and it'll be interesting to see how this develops in terms of the overall job market out there. Now, what we do know is that we are beginning to see more and more of jobs moving around, and as we see that happening, not certain where the basic as teachers exit from teaching. And it was one time I thought, this is a little anecdotal information I was told by a teacher, a master teacher, that when they received that training, they had a training, and this was in 1990, that education was one of the gateways to various other jobs. In other words, that commanded a bachelor's degree, and that happened in many, many industries. And they would go into teaching for a few years, and if other job opportunities out there, they'd move on. Now you've seen many, many teachers that are working for Uber and have 2 or 3 different jobs to, as they say, survive in this economy. And some of those people are moving on to other job opportunities, and this leaves a hole in education. It's going to be starting to get much more difficult to find young people in many of these states, depending on which state you're in, to come into education in the numbers that the baby boomers will be going out of education. And this is an important number to look at. One of the things that we like to look at here, Warren Buffett is talking up Apple. When we do the special, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Apple itself, from our standpoint, we don't give it advice on buying and what not to buy. But Apple, like some of the more mature players there, how many iPhones can you sell? Period. Warren Buffett calls it a sticky product and endorsed Apple's decision to buy back his own. Well, a lot of corporations have bought things back. That's not only we love to see Apple go down in price. Buffett said it. Apple is now the 3rd largest. Berkshire Hathaway is the 3rd largest stockholder behind the Vanguard Group and BlackRock Incorporated. BlackRock, of course, people are familiar with them. So many of them are going on there. Actually, Charlie Munger, I made a mistake here. He is now 94. So some of the questions here, what? Guns, healthcare, their investment choices for stockholders, journalists, and now anyway. The 6-hour meeting... it's always a very, very long meeting where he takes questions from people. Munger, meanwhile, answers a question on steel tariffs imposed by the White House, acknowledging U.S. producers are being hurt. Even Donald Trump could be right on this stuff. Well, that's the problem. And we also disagree with Buffett's defense of Wells Fargo there. Buffett said the bank had committed the cardinal sin of incentivizing workers into kind of a crazy conduct. Well, no doubt about that. $1 billion addressed, but that's just a pittance for actually what they made. And he went on to say, even there, his phone is not ringing off the hook, and part of the reason there is when Buffett and company go into something, they are looking for $1 billion deals. The smaller operators They usually don't even buy there's some character here, and I don't know who Mr. William Robinson is. He is a Scottish native who fights fires and does forest work in Switzerland. He was lining up 7.5 hours before the door opened. That's insane. It gets me first place in the queue. Well, I suppose we want to be in the queue. Anyway, that part of the story. Let me switch here. This is actually the unemployment insurance claims here. The end of April the 28th, the advanced figure seasonal adjusted claims was down 211,000. Actually, was an increase of 200,000. The week's level of 209,000. 4-week average was 221,000 that could file for unemployment. Claims claim taking process in Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands have not returned to normal. No doubt about it, probably ain't no place to do it. Anyway, advanced season adjusted unemployment insurance rate was 1.2% for the week ending the 21st of April, a decrease of 1/10%. The advanced numbers for seasonally adjusted unemployment during the week ended at 1,756,000, a decrease of 77,000 from the previous week. So there's quite a few people out there in the unemployment queue. And we'll leave this one behind. We haven't given that figure in quite some time. Okay, we finally got this up state by state. I had to look at a different workstation here, but nonetheless, here we are. This was released on Friday. Gross domestic product by state, fourth quarter and annual 2017. The real GDP by state. Here, increased in 47 states, District of Columbia in Q4 of 2017, according to the latest statistics released by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. The percentage change in GDP in the fourth quarter ranged from 5.2% in Texas to negative 1.3% in North Dakota. And seeing if I get and some of these negatives in Montana, North Dakota. Let's see what we got here. Here we go. We can look at it now. Washington State, 3.1%. Oregon, 3.7%. Nevada, 3%. California, 3.4%. In Montana, 1.3%. And in North Dakota, negative 1.3%. Minnesota, 1.5%. South Dakota, negative 0.5%. Nebraska, 0.9%. Colorado, 3.2%. Arizona, 3.1%. New Mexico, 1.6%. Oklahoma, 3.3%. Texas, very high, 5.2%. Missouri, 2.1%. Arkansas, 2.5%. Louisiana, 2.2%. Mississippi, 2.6%. That's good for them. 2.8% in Alabama, 2.5% in Georgia. 3.7% actually growth there in Florida. South Carolina 3%, North Carolina 2%, West Virginia 1%, Virginia 2.5%, Pennsylvania 2.5%, Washington D.C. 1.2%, Maryland 1.2%, Delaware 0.2%, New Jersey 2.1%, Connecticut 2.4%, Commonwealth of Massachusetts 2.4%. Maine 2.6%. Maine's usually down a bit. New York, no change at all according to this. Anyway, these are percentage change in real GDP by states. Now, this is in the third and fourth quarter of 2017. All right. Now to changes in real GDP. It grew in 47 states, District of Columbia. This is in 2017. The percentage change in real GDP ranged from 4.4% in Washington to a negative 0.2% in Louisiana. So some of the highlights here: durable good manufacturing increased 7.2% nationally and combined to grow in every state and District of Columbia. This industry has been leading contributions to increase in real GDP in 5 of the 10 fastest growing states. Construction increased 8.5% nationally and contributed to growth in 49 states. Professional, scientific, and technical services increased 4.2% nationally. Now, this is in 2017. Mining increased 10% nationally, the 5th consecutive quarter of growth. Adding to Texas, this industry made a notable contributions to increase in GDP in Oklahoma and Alaska. Agriculture, forest, fishing, and hunting decreased 1.7%. Annual GDP by states. This is in 2017. Now remember, Washington State 4.4, Oregon 2.5, California 3%, 3.5 in Nevada, Arizona 3.2, Utah 3.1, Montana 6/10, Wyoming 2, Colorado 3.5, New Mexico at 8/10, Texas 2.6, Oklahoma sluggish here at 5/10, and Kansas at a negative 1/10, Nebraska at 6/10, South Dakota at 3, and North Dakota at 1, Minnesota at 1.9, Iowa at 5/10, Missouri at 1.1, Arkansas the same 1.1, a negative 2.2 in Louisiana, a negative 3/10 in Mississippi, 1.2 in Alabama, Florida 2.2, Georgia 2.7, Tennessee 2.5, Kentucky 1.8, Indiana and 2.1, Illinois 1.2, Michigan 2.3, Ohio 1.9, 1.8 there, and 1.1 in New York, Vermont, New Hampshire 1.9 there. Commonwealth of Massachusetts 2.6, that's respectable in the Commonwealth, and D.C. 1.7. You get a little regionally here. Trade and information services were the leading contributor to a real GDP in Washington, the fastest growing state. Real estate, rental and leasing, healthcare, social assistance, durable goods were leading factor to national economic growth in 2017. Real estate, rentals, and leasing, the leading contribution to GDP in Colorado and Nevada. Healthcare, social assistance in Arizona. Durable goods manufacturing, leading contribution in Utah and California. Very interesting to see that. Is some of the updates here. In definition, let me just make sure everyone's got this straight here. GDP by state, the market value of goods and services produced by the labor and property located in the state. GDP of the state's counterpart of national GDP. The Bureau features more comprehensive measurement of economic activity. So, GDP and GDP, current dollar statistics, are values and prices of the period the transaction occurred. Real value, inflation-adjusted statistics, contribution to growth, and, or an industry's contribution to states' overall real GDP. Anything else you need to know? Gross national product, domestic product, DP, gross, the relation of it, gross domestic product, GDP, to by state to the U.S. GDP accounts GDP by state, and it's added there, includes wages, salaries of workers, earned income by individuals and joint enterprises, as well as corporations. GDP is calculated as a sum of what consumers, businesses, and governments spend on the final goods and services, plus investments in net foreign trade. Inferior income should equal what is spent, but due to different sources, measurements, income, etc. there. GDP by state from the U.S. differs from GDP in the national income accounts, thus the industry economic accounts by GDP. Now, some of the resources here, when we look at annual GDP here, and these are percentage changes in real GDP by a state. I hope we got that. Domestic gross national product by states. That was the fourth quarter and annual there of 2017. Annual GDP growth in 49 states. And the next report will be on the 24th of July. Some of what is going on there, gross GDP here. Anyway, this is on a GDP, so gross domestic product by states in the fourth quarter and 2017. A review of 2017, and we're moving so fastly here, it would have been, most of it would have been the Obama economy, maybe Q4, it started a little Q3, transferring into the Trump economy, and definitely the first quarter of 2018. And as we look at the second quarter, a variable mixed bag of what is going on here as we move along. Now, let me go to the BBC because I need to get petrol prices and a little. From Argentina's central bank has raised its interest rate for the third time in 8 days. But this is the peso. The bank raised the rate to 40% from 33.25 a day after they were raised to 30.25 a week ago. They were at 27.25. The raises are aimed at supporting the peso, which has lost a quarter of its value over the past year. Inflation, perennial problem in Argentina was at 25% in 2017. So this is where the peso is. This is from the BBC. The crisis looks to set to continue unless the government steps in and reassures investors there. Argentina has some problems, no doubt about it. Risk to the peso has been brewing for a while. So that's basically where Argentina is. Daniel Gallus, the BBC South American business correspondent, Argentina's president. Now, this is Marcelo Macri is a controversial figure in the country that is still strongly divided ideologically. But amongst international investors, he is unanimously praised since coming to the office. He's a right-winger too. However, he's not working in a critical battle. He's not winning a critical battle in the country. The once again, it's inflation. Am I taking a quote? There's been a lot of sell-off of the peso, no doubt about that. The opposition wants to stop Macri. That's M-A-C-R-I, from removing subsidies and control prices now, such as industry and utility tariffs. which have become more inflationary in the short term. Friday was a day of emergency measures, the 40% raise there, and he believes a second phase to recover Argentina, but they're not convincing. So in other words, he is in very deep trouble in Argentina. We'll keep following Argentina to see where Argentina ends up. Doesn't look that good. The central bank has sold 1.5 billion of national reserves in a day. They've just got enormous problems there. Let's look at the data. The FTSE. We'll do the FTSE 100 at 0.86%. The change there was 64.42. So we'll do that one anyway. In Amsterdam, they're 3.97 on Friday, we assume. In France, 14.39. All these in the positive. The DAC was at 1.29. At 129.45. The pan-European market was at 21.47 in Madrid. They were at 65.30. And let me go to Bombay. They were negative 1.87.76. And in Hong Kong, Hang Seng was also down 386.87. The Nikkei was also down 35.25. And let me go back to the Dow. It was up at 332.36. The Nasdaq at 121.47. And the commodities market out of the Midwest city of Chicago was at the Merck. Was at 33.96. We're going to still have to do something about this. I don't like the way it's going here. Anyway, Brent crude at $74.87. That is $1.25 change. West Texas crude, these are futures incidentally, at $69.72. $1.29 change. T-Boone Pickens is still jumping for joy. Even though $50 barrel oil is not his retirement. Anyway, the Forex, let's see, where are we there? Gold at $1,315.05. And that is a gain of $10.85. We don't have the Bloomberg Market Index, unfortunately, here, but we'll have to solve these problems. Natural gas was down 2 cents. For those that have great interest in it, is where they were. I'll have to send a note to the BBC and find out what is going on with this. Anyway, this will end our program here. This Week in Economics. We'll place on... well, no, I guess we won't. We'll put Warren Buffett's interview on with the Warren Buffett special program, because we run a little bit over here. We're trying to get these broadcasts down under 50 minutes if we can. We have a lot of information this week coming in here with GDP, the jobs numbers, state by state, to see how the states were doing in 2017. Some better, obviously, than others. Growth is not uniformed across the U.S. Have a good week, everyone. For those in business, make next week a productive one. For the consumer, keep your eyes on the prize. In the consumer sector, it's kind of interesting on the public TV program there, the National Business Report. Yeah. Anyway, they were talking about delivery services, all of these 2-day, 1 minute, 2-hour delivery services, how many people are being added there. It'll be interesting when we start looking at how autonomous cars will affect some of this. Of course, they won't affect bicycles. But there was a third-party company that actually was, and we'll put this up on at Cranston Analytics so you can look at it, But nonetheless, this will do it for us on our partner, Cranston Analytics. You can get them at on Twitter at Cranston.com or on Facebook at Cranston Analytics. And we have a number of things there that come about. So we'll have it there. And the Twitter feed, Economics 2010. We just kept the Twitter feed around. You'll see us twittering about economic matters and other matters. Good day. And have a good weekend. Oh, and incidentally, happy Cinco de Mayo.